It's time to make it, just give it a try. 'Cause you can make it like the old fat guy.
Welcome to this episode of You Can Make It with David Farrell, the old fat guy. Today I'm getting my mojo on for a little bit of a contest. A group on YouTube has started a competition called the Great Chili Confrontation. Now, how can a fat old guy from Canada stand a chance against all those Americans making great chili? I have a secret weapon, but I'll get to that in a minute. So I'm going to be making a batch of chili today. Now, because I'm going into the contest, I'm going all out and I'm putting everything into it. So it's going to take 3 days in total to make it. So I really need to start with my usual first ingredient, which is copious quantities of wine taken internally. So good. And then we'll get to the first thing I'm going to use for my chili and the major secret weapon I have from Canada, which is Great Alberta beef. There's not going to be any hamburger or ground up beef here. I'm going to smoke and shred a beautiful 2-pound piece of cross rib Alberta prime beef. Now, cross rib is a piece off of the chuck. You can also use blade or any of the other kind of tougher cuts of beef, but you don't want to use round or bottom round because it's too lean. You're going to want some fat in this for flavor. And speaking of flavor, I'm going to really kick this up. I'm not going to just use this excellent beef. I'm going to give it an injection. And I've made up an injection liquid of 40 milliliters or 3 tablespoons of beef stock, 5 milliliters of soy sauce, 5 milliliters of Worcestershire sauce, and 5 milliliters of chili powder. That's a teaspoon of those. So it'd be 3 tablespoons of beef stock, 1 teaspoon of soy sauce, 1 teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce, and 1 teaspoon of chili powder. And I've got a meat injector here. And I'm just going to put my injection into the injector. Oop, stick it in so it doesn't flow out. That was stupid of me, but no problem. And we'll just give it a little shot about every inch or so all over the beef. Now don't worry about some squirting out. It's going to. It's just what happens. We're just trying to get some of that flavor into the center of the beef. And we'll go around and get the other side here. Now, get the last of the injection in. There we go. Just make sure we get it all in it. There's a little bit in there. And last couple of shots. A little bit in there. And the last little bit we'll just put in there. There we go. Now, you'll see always you get some that comes out. Just roll the beef in what comes out to get it moistened. And now I want to switch to a dry plate because you want the rub that I've made to set up on the beef. So we'll get a dry plate out. There we go. And we'll move the beef over to the dry plate. Now, what we're going to do is put a rub on it. Now for my rub, I've got a half teaspoon of salt, a half teaspoon of onion powder, a half teaspoon of garlic powder, a half teaspoon of pepper. So that's 2.5 milliliters of salt, pepper, onion powder, and garlic powder, or 1/2 teaspoon of each. And then add 1 teaspoon of chili powder. That's my rub. So we're just going to rub it all over the surface of our 2-pound piece of beef. Now you'll note I'm not really overcoating it. This is just a little bit extra flavor that's going to go into the meat. And I already did that side. That's a little bit on this side. And there we have a nicely rubbed piece of beef. Now the next secret is you want the surface of the beef to be dry when you smoke it because it takes the smoke better. So that's the end of the first day because this is going to go into the fridge where it's going to sit overnight, and all those little injections we put in there are going to work its way through the sinews, and the flavor is going to come in from the outside, from the rub, and give a nice surface that's going to give a really good bark and a great taste to our beef when we put it in the chili. I'll see you tomorrow. Welcome to day 2 of the Chili Confrontation cook-off of my version of chili. It's a cold, wintry day here, but don't worry about my little piece of beef. It's doing fine in my smoker at 230 degrees Fahrenheit over some whiskey barrel oak pellets, just getting a nice layer of smoke to add more complexity to my chili. I'll see you in a while. Well, I smoked my little chunk of beef here on the smoker for about 3.5 hours at 230 to get it to an internal temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And now it's got a beautiful dark bark on it. It's got that red color from the smoking. But what do you really need after a day out in the cold but a nice warm steam bath? So that's what this is going to get now, is some moist heat. So I put it in a pan, and I'm going to add 1 cup or 250 milliliters of beef broth. And I'm going to cover that with tinfoil to make steam inside it. Or aluminum foil, I'm showing my age. We'll just seal it up nice and tight. Now, I'm going to put a temperature probe in this and put it in my oven at 230 degrees. Now, the thing is, I could keep doing it in the smoker at 230, but it's a cold winter day and I'd be heating up outside, and it's not going to get any more smoke with the foil. So instead, I'll finish it with the oven. It should take a few hours to get to internal temperature of about 203, 204 degrees. Then I'm going to pull it off. See you later. To the end of day 2, and I cooked my piece of beef in the oven until it was an internal temperature of 203 degrees. Now, if you spent the day sitting outside in a smoker and then coming in and having a steam bath in the oven, what would you really need? A rest. Just like my piece of beef, it has been resting here for 2 hours in the foil that it was covered under, and now let's have a look at it. We're just going to pull the foil off. Oh, look at that beautiful dark surface, and those juices around it are just something to die for. So we're going to take the beef off of the pot and put it onto this cutting board. Now, this is the time when I got to warn you about something. Whatever you do not taste pieces of the beef, because if you do, what you'll find is it is so good that you will not be able to resist eating all of the bark on it, and you need that flavor for your chili. So just cut it up and resist starting to taste it because you won't be able to stop. It's like potato chips. So I'm going to cut the strings that held this little piece of beef together off. There we go. Now, you'll notice it shrunk up quite a bit. You lose about 1/3 of the weight to cooking, but you'll see it just pulls apart so easily into chunks. And once it pulls apart into chunks, just use your fingers and start to rip it apart. Just rip it into shreds. That's what you want to do. There's a bit of fat that I'll just pull out. There we go. One piece of fat out, and we'll just got all lean beef left behind. Okay. So now I just need a container to put this beef in, and we're going to chop it a bit because you want it to be spoon-sized when it's in your chili. So I'm just going to get a container from my cupboard here. There we go. Now, cut it into about 1/2-inch lengths. That makes nice spoon-sized pieces of beef. And there's the last of the beef to go in. And despite what I said, you got to just try a little bit of that bark. It's just incredible. Oh, the flavor. Okay, so we've got our beef chopped and shredded up. Now, there's all this wonderful liquid, and you do not want to let it go to waste because it is wonderful stuff. So we're just going to pour it into a clear container because, well, it's wonderful. The flat that floats on top isn't so wonderful. So we'll just pour it in there, and you'll see that the fat floats up to the top of the vessel. Now, if you get a turkey baster, you can just go in and suck the juice out from underneath that fat. And just put it over the beef. This is just the most incredible broth and is going to make our chili something very special. There we go. Now, when you get down to the bottom there, you might have to tilt it a bit. And it's better to leave a little bit of juice behind than to pick up the fat. So I think I can get one more squirt out of that. There we go. That's about all I'm going to get. And this is just going to get covered and put in the fridge overnight. And tomorrow we start to put the chili together. Can hardly wait. See you tomorrow. It's day 3 in preparing my chili. And I'm going to do it in an electric fry pan. Normally I just do it in a pot on the stove, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So I've preheated my electric fry pan to about 350 degrees, which is about medium hot on the stove. And I could use oil to start it off to cook my onions in, but why not add some more flavor, I said to myself. So I have here a 1/2 cup of chopped up bacon that I'm going to saute to get the grease out of it to add some more flavor to my chili. So we'll just put that in the pan and let it brown up. Okay, it's taken 4 or 5 minutes, and you can see that the bacon is starting to get just a little bit of color, which is what you're looking for. Now, it didn't rend a lot of fat because this is my homemade bacon that I make out of leaner pork, but it's got enough, and don't worry if you use store-bought bacon and have more fat, that'll be just fine too. So what we're going to do now is put 1.5 cups of 1/4-inch dice onions into the saucepan, and we're going to saute them up until they're soft. There we go. This should take about 5 or 6 minutes. Okay, I've been cooking this for about 4 or 5 minutes, and the onions are just starting to get soft. So I have 125 milliliters or 1/2 cup of bacon I sauteed up. I have 1.5 cups or 375 milliliters of onions that I diced, and now I cook just until they're starting to get clear. You don't want to brown them. So now that they're just starting to get clear, we're going to add some peppers. Now, I don't have access to the fancy arbos and hatch chilies and all that the people in the south have, so I pretty well have to go with canned up here in the Canadian Rockies. So what I have here is a can of 118 milliliters, or about half a cup of diced green chilies. And I'm just going to throw them in. And I have here some jalapenos in adobo sauce. They come in a little can, and they're really spicy, so this is going to give some heat to it. And I got 40 milliliters or 3 tablespoons of them, and I chopped up the peppers in those. And we'll throw that in. And then I'm going to add 2 cloves of garlic. And I'm just going to stir for about 30 seconds to a minute, because I just want to get them to give off a little flavor from the heat. Now, if you want to make your chili hotter, this is a place where you can do it. Just double or triple the amounts of the jalapenos, chipotle jalapenos in adobo sauce. So if you add more of the chipotle jalapenos in adobo sauce, it will be hotter. I'm making this pretty mild because I can always heat it up again later. So I've just stirred them in until you can start to really smell the smell coming off of them. And now I'm going to add some seasonings. And here I have 15 milliliters or a tablespoon of chili powder, 5 milliliters or a teaspoon of dried thyme, and 5 milliliters or a teaspoon of dried rosemary. The thyme and rosemary are kind of unusual, but I find it gives a certain earthy pop to the chili, and I like it. So we just dump those in, and now we're just going to stir for 30 seconds because we just want to get that chili and herbs just heated up. When you heat them up in a fry pan for just a few seconds, they give off a wonderful, wonderful odor, almost too powerful. So now they've had just a few seconds in there, I'm going to add a large can of diced tomatoes. Now, this is 796 milliliters or 28 fluid ounces of diced tomatoes. I use diced tomatoes because I want some texture, some chew. I want some chunks of tomato in there. But I also want some creamy silkiness, so I'm going to add some canned tomato sauce. And here I have 398 milliliters, which is about 1.75 cups of tomato sauce. And to make it silky, if you add tomato paste, it adds some body. So I have 5.5 ounces or 156 milliliters of tomato paste I'm going to put in there. And stir that in a bit. And then I'm going to add my secret ingredient, which is 25 milliliters or 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. It just gives it a bit darker color. It not going to taste like soy sauce, but it gives it a great color and a great meaty taste. So there we go, 2 tablespoons or 25 milliliters of soy sauce. And we'll stir that in. You see how it darkens it up. That's what I was looking for. And then you remember that meat that had such a long day yesterday and gave its all to me shredding it? Well, it's time to put the meat and the juices that came off of it into my chili. So we'll just toss them in. And we'll stir that up. Change to a spoon because it's easier to stir. There we go. I just forgot one thing, so give me a second. Sorry about that. I forgot to bring my beer. I've got just 1 can of regular lager beer like you buy at the store, whatever you like to drink on a hot day. Try to stay away from the heavy dark ales and that. You're looking for a crisp, fresh beer. And you want to add about half a can. Okay. That'll be about 175 milliliters or 2/3 of a cup around there, 2/3, 3/4 of a cup. And stir that in. There we go. That's most of the ingredients in my chili. There'll be a little bit more later though, so we're going to just bring this to a simmer, and we're going to start off by letting it simmer for 1/2 hour with no lid on it, and I'll see you after that. So I let my chili simmer for an hour with no lid on it. What you're trying to do is thicken the sauce up a bit. That brings some sweetness out of the tomatoes and gives you that lovely, rich, thick texture that I've got here. Now, at this point, I always like to add a bit of sweetness. So the problem is I can't tell you exactly how much to add, because every time I buy canned beans, some are sweeter and some are more bitter, more sour taste in them. I like to start with 15 milliliters of molasses, and then I'll give it a taste and see if it needs some more. So we'll just give her 15 milliliters or a tablespoonful of molasses. There we go. And we'll give that a good stir in. Love molasses. This is really a lot easier to stir in a pot, but there we go. So I've stirred the molasses in, and let's give it a taste, and we'll see how we're doing for sweetness. It's pretty good, but I think I'll give it just another teaspoon or so. There we go, that should do it. Now, there's a large debate out there in the cooking world about whether chili should have beans or no beans. Now, I like beans in my chili because I think they give them a nice creaminess that goes well with the sauce, and especially with the sweet tomatoes and the complex meats and chilies. But I'm not like some people. I don't like a big bunch of beans with just a little bit of beef rolling around in it. I like a lot of beef and a few beans. So I've taken a large can of red kidney beans, and I've drained it and rinsed it because I want to get the salt off of it. And I'm going to stir that in now. Now the reason I didn't put it in up front is I don't want it to cook till they get mushy. So put the beans in and stir it around. Now you can see how rich and thick that is. You want to cook it for another half an hour to heat up the beans, but you don't want it getting any thicker. So we're going to give it its last half hour cook with the lid on. So I'm just going to put the lid on and let this simmer for another half an hour. See you then. My chili is simmered under cover for 30 minutes and it's now ready to eat. I just can't wait. So we're going to take a big scoop full of it. And look at how meaty and rich that is. Big chunks of beef and tomato. Beans added to it, give it some creaminess. Now, I like my chili with a little shredded cheese on top. This is some Havarti. I like it because it's nice and creamy. And then I like to sprinkle a little bit of raw onion over it just to get a bit of crunch. And that's my perfect bowl of chili. So let's give it a taste. Oh, look at that. Big and rich and hearty. For first thing you get is the chili powder and the richness of the molasses, the creaminess of the beans, and the big chewy chunk of beef. And this isn't really spicy, but it's got a heat that slowly builds on the back of your tongue and is really complex. This is an absolutely wonderful bowl of chili, and this is how an old-fat Canadian makes it. And the best part is, you can make it too.
I have a good woman, I ain't good looking, but I do some cooking, I'm the old fat guy. So use that oven if you want some lovin', be like the old fat guy. Be like the old fat guy.